Hello and welcome to the Detective Case
and Detective Close podcast.
We're your hosts. My name's Aaron Shirley.
I'm Brian Townsend.
Today we're going to be talking about a critical incident that happened here locally in Springfield, Missouri, and we want to kind of hash that out and also want to speak on the topic of officer wellness. Too often in our career field, people kind of put us on these pedestals, the same as when you see a doctor in a lab coat or like a Navy SEAL, that there's something a little bit different about us. Maybe we're not human and things don't impact us the same. But that could be further from the truth. Things that we see, things that we deal with, things that are done to us in our career fields can really mess with our day-to-day operations, how we feel, how it impacts us when we go home at night.
Yeah, so we're excited for our guest, Officer Josiah Overton from the Springfield Police Department. And I know you were involved in a critical incident. But before that, let's just get to know you, your police career. Tell us about your law enforcement career.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me. First of all, I really appreciate the opportunity. So I started in 2017. I was hired by the Springfield Police Department. Just fresh out of college, didn't really have a plan of what I wanted to do. So got offered a job in Springfield and decided to stay around. I'd come down here to go to college and ended up going through the academy. Started in January of 18 and went through the academy. Graduated the academy and got to have a lot of good experiences on FTO. Was fortunate to have some really good FTOs that really taught me a lot about not just policing in general, but really how to go out and chase down bad guys and get into stuff and the fun stuff. So did that, got off FTO and kind of got bounced around, went to night shift and then went to day shift, and figured out very quickly that day shift was not for me. Not just because of the work, but I don't like waking up early, so that played a role. But and then eventually got to choose where I went the next year, and kind of found my home on the second shift on the north side of Springfield, which was 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. and really enjoyed that type of work. Worked on the northwest side of Springfield for 3 years and kind of had that experience and got to kind of know people and kind of find my footing as a police officer. And then we ended up, as a department, we switched to 12-hour shifts. And so then I'm like, well, I'm going to stay on nights. So ended up working the night shift on the north side again. And that was a big adjustment just because thirds is a little bit different than seconds. So the staying up all night part of it. And I did that for a year, had a really good squad with a lot of young cops that really enjoyed working with them. I was the old guy because everyone else had just gotten out of the academy and they were all from the same academy. But they were really good dudes, some of my best friends now. So did that. And then now currently after that, I've moved into the community services section and what's called a PAR officer, which PAR stands for Police Area Representative. So we are divided the city up into beats, and each beat has a PAR officer, and we deal with long-standing problems. So the way I describe it to people is, if your neighbor sells meth, you call me. And if you don't like the way your neighbor mows his yard, you also call me, and everything in between. So we investigate those complaints. Some of them are criminal. Some of them are just civil neighborhood issues. We work with other agencies like Building Developmental Services that do the code inspection and that kind of stuff. And then we also do all the community events, work the fair, Route 66 festival. We drive the ice cream truck around and hand out ice cream and, some stuff, hand out all the toys and stuff like that. So that's what I'm doing right now. I really enjoy it. And it's a different spot. It's a much different pace, but you still get to go out and do police work, but you also get to kind of build relationships with people even beyond what you do, just the normal patrol type level.
So you can speak on that, because I think it's important in law enforcement that community-oriented policing isn't cool or popular, right? But that's actually how you get things done or solve issues in communities.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk to people most of the time, you go to calls and you deal with the same people on patrol and you're like, I don't want to go talk to this person. But being in my position, you have to talk to them. And sometimes you can figure it out. I mean, it can be just someone who just wants to talk, like the old lady who's lonely, who's living by herself, and she doesn't really have a criminal problem, but you can recognize that and try to help her out and maybe get her involved in a neighborhood meeting or neighborhood associations and get her into that part of it. And then it also plays forward because building those relationships, you get to meet people and know people, and they have that different view of the police, right? So they maybe have this negative view that, the police only come whenever something bad happens and the police are only trying to get us in trouble. Whereas I've been able to meet people and establish relationships. And then later on down the road, I run into that same person and maybe they've done something bad. Maybe they're a witness to a crime, but their whole outlook on how they talk to police is completely different. So maybe, they don't want to talk to the patrol officer who's wearing blues and just there investigating. And instead I show up and they're like, oh, I know Officer Josiah. I'll have to talk to Officer Josiah. And so, and just being able to have that relationship, and it's really helped me grow a lot as an officer, because not just my investigative skills, but also like talking to people and really being able to like listen and hear what people are saying, because sometimes they'll tell you stuff that they didn't even mean to tell you if you just get them talking. And so that being able to be in the community and establish relationships is really something that I enjoy.
Wow. So you're assigned to a section or a portion of Springfield, and you said it's called PAR.
PAR, yeah, it's for police area representative.
Okay, and like you said, you handle everything, whether it's complaint or whether it's an event that impacts that area. You're going to be a face there.
Yep, yeah. So we do all the events, and then like whenever we have like the big events, National Night Out, like we all go out, like the whole unit goes out and we participate in National Night Out. Some other stuff like the Christmas parade, Bass Pro Marathon, all that kind of stuff. We get to go out as a unit and get to kind of be there and be seen and talk to people and do whatever we need. So it's a very different experience. You never know like what you're going to do one week, because one week you could get the call and be like, hey, we have to do this. And you're like, I've never done this before. So it's interesting, but I enjoy it.
Yeah. How many officers are assigned to that section?
Currently there's 8 officers. So we have 8 beats in Springfield. So there's one for every beat. And then we have a corporal who does like the special events planning. They do like all the major events for permits and stuff like that. That's what the corporal does. And then we have a sergeant who kind of supervises the unit and tells us what to do.
That's what sergeants do.
Yeah.
So your critical incident, the shooting, were you assigned to this unit at the time, or is this when you were on patrol?
No, it was when I was on patrol.
Okay.
The incident was March 15th, 2020. So I graduated the police academy in July 2018. So not counting FTO, I was like a year and a half off on the street, like pretty brand new. So really trying to like find my footing and figure out what was going on.
I think it's important, like whenever we talk about an incident or a situation or an officer, to kind of like get the makeup of the department and like the town, right? Because a lot of people don't know Springfield, Missouri, right? Like it's maybe just another small town, but it's could actually be the next nexus of crime, just because of how it's situated in the state and all the highways that run through here to connect to other major cities.
Yeah. I mean, Springfield's a fairly large city. It's like 170,000 people. The big, like you said, the highways, we have Interstate 44 that runs along the north side. And then we have Highway 65 and Highway 60 that run on the east side and the south side. So it's kind of situated right there in the middle, kind of in between Kansas City and St. Louis, just north of Tulsa. So we have that. It's a fairly decent sized department. We have 300 something officers. So about a good size, not like a typical, small town department, but fairly decently sized, and it's a good place to work. I enjoy Springfield.
It's probably one of the largest departments in Missouri when you look at the sheer numbers, because Kansas City is so chopped up, and so is St. Louis, right?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think like Kansas City Metro and like St. Louis County are bigger, but Springfield is one of the bigger ones in Missouri. I mean, Springfield's the 3rd largest city in Missouri, so it kind of reflects that, trying to catch up to Kansas City and St. Louis.
And the size of the city and the size of the police department allows you to have these specialized units where you can be more proactive in the communities, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about working for a bigger department, is there's a lot of room for movement and career development. So you can kind of do a lot of different things depending on what your interests are and what you want to do going forward.
We talked about like being in college. Was there a catalyst or a reason why you chose policing?
Honestly, I really don't know. Like I'd kind of always like had the idea in the back of my mind since I was in high school. Like I wanted to do a job where I didn't like sit behind a desk and I got to go out and do something. And I wanted to have a job where like when I came home at the end of the day and my wife or kids asked me like, what'd you do today? And I could tell them like, I did this, like I made a difference, like made my community better. So that was the biggest thing. And then obviously the honest answer is like, they told me I could drive cars fast and shoot guns. So they're like, yeah, you get to do all this crazy stuff. So that definitely played a role, but I just wanted to be able to have a job where I was out in the community and got to meet new people. And it was always an adventure. You never know what was going to happen. So I really liked that part of it.
A lot of police officers are adrenaline junkies, right?
Oh yeah.
We like the drive.
For sure. That was definitely that, never knowing what's going to happen around the next call or the next corner, and just being able to experience that was something that like, that was really what hooked me like really early on, doing like ride-alongs and stuff. Whenever I was early, I had a good friend that worked for the police department that I went to college with, and I did a ride along with him, and like we got into some stuff very early, and I was like, this is crazy. This is so cool. And I was like, yep, this is what I want to do. So
Awesome. Let's talk about this
Yeah.
this critical incident.
well, yeah.
So you're about a year and a half in, not counting your FTO time.
Mhm.
So maybe 2 years in total
Yeah.
time with the Springfield Police Department.
Yeah. Just
You're on
counting.
patrol.
Yeah. So January 18 was the academy, my start date. So to March is just 2 years and 2 months. So
Wow.
yeah. I was a patrol officer on the north side of Springfield. This night I was what was called a relief driver. So I actually didn't have a beat. So I was just relief all over the north side. Just kind of the way it shapes out is you have your beat drivers and your relief drivers help them out. It was a normal Sunday night, if I'm being honest. Like nothing felt out of the ordinary. I just made a car stop right before this all kicked off, and it was one of those cars where like you stop it and you're like, oh, there's gonna be some dope in here, and like I'm like searching it, like had the canine come out, get a search on it, and I'm like going through it, and one of the things I remember finding is like a duffel bag just full of rocks. I was like, well, I know you do meth because the only people who collect rocks are people that do meth. So found some paraphernalia and stuff, but didn't end up finding anything like drugs or anything. Um, but while that was going on, the city's divided into 2 zones. So we have a north side and a south side. We're super fortunate. We have, because of that, the north side has its own radio channel and the south side has its own radio channel. And you can hear the other one, but you have to switch if you want to talk on it. But I would obviously listen just because if something big happens on the south side, I want to know what's going on.
Now, is it fair to say, for those not from Springfield, Missouri, that the north side is more known for
yeah,
criminal activity?
Yeah, everyone kind of thinks that like the north side is
Okay.
like the bad side, which it is. Like the economics are very different on the north side. The north side's a little poorer. You have a lot more like hotels and motels and stuff like that. And then the south side is more like businesses. It's where like the mall and stuff is. And then once you get very far south, it's like the residential, like the big houses and stuff like that. So everyone says that they both have equal amounts of crime. It's just very different. But like you said, like there's a reason I like to work the north side. Like that's kind of like if you're going to get into something, it tends to happen more on the north side. It can happen anywhere, but I enjoy the north side. So,
Okay.
So like I said, I listened to both the north and the south side. But while this was going on my traffic stop, I'd heard calls about shots being fired on the south side. Nothing crazy. It sounded like at first, the first one that came out said maybe it was 2 cars shooting back and forth at each other on the very southeast part of the city, which is very far from me. And one thing about Springfield is it's not out of the norm for us to have shootings, especially drive-by type shootings where no one gets hit and we show up. So you kind of become complacent with that kind of stuff. So you hear it and you're like, okay, cool. It's a shooting that stinks for the south side guys that have to go down there and work that because it's time consuming and tedious. And they'd found one of the cars, but they couldn't find, there was no one in it. And then the other car that was involved had taken off. So they were kind of working that side. Then shortly after that, there was another shooting, actually on Highway 65. And it was a similar type car that had gone and made the same shot out of its windows at another car in 65. And that kind of, this time he was heading north, which North 65 runs into north side. So I was aware of that and kind of paying attention. And I was on the east side. So I was on kind of the main Glenstone, which is like the furthest east main thoroughfare, closest to 65. So like I knew that I was in that area, but
So you're fresh into the shift, and there's already been 2 different shootings.
this is about halfway through. So this is like midnight. So we're like 5 hours, 6 hours into the shift by the time it's in between 11 and midnight when this happens. But
And I think the makeup too, like I said, like the town. So things in Missouri are really spread out, right? So just to go from one side of the town to the other, just like, do you like the mileage or how big or how long it would take? Like when responding officers have to geographically have to move from one place to another.
I don't know the mileage, but I know like it depends obviously a lot on the time of day, but it can take you. I mean, if it's in between 5 and 8 o'clock, like it can take you just driving normal to go from the east side of the city to the west side of the city, 10 to 20 minutes because we have like major thoroughfares, but we also have a lot of traffic. So if you get stuck in that traffic, it kind of takes a lot. Now, it is very spread out, but like once you get past like 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m., you can zip through the city a little quicker just because of the way it's set up and there's not a lot of traffic. So that kind of part of things takes into account. So at this point, like it was it's like 11:30, almost close to midnight, and our third shift, they were the ones who relieved us. They came on like 9, 10 o'clock. So usually about 11, midnight, 1 is like when you start looking to take your break and go get something to eat. And that's actually, I made that traffic stop and I was like, I'm hungry and I'm going to go get some food. So I actually go down into the south side. One of the only places that's open late at night is Jimmy John's. So that's where kind of like where like I was on a first name basis with like the people that like the workers in there, and I'd go downtown and get Jimmy John's and come back up and meet, one of my friends, and we'd sit around and eat and then go do more stuff. So um that was kind of where I decided to go. I kind of continued south and I'd reached Glenstone and Chestnut. So Chestnut Expressway is a major thoroughfare that runs from the east side of the city to the west side of the city. It goes from Highway 65 to West Bypass, and that's like basically one of the roads that it'll get you straight across the city without any issues. I was sitting at the intersection at the red light, waiting to go southbound through Glenstone because I was going downtown, and we have computers in our cars with our systems called CAD. And I always have my CAD pulled up with the pending calls because a lot of times you'll see a call pop up because the way our dispatch works is the call taker puts it into the computer, and then the dispatcher who's actually dispatching it to the officers has to see it in the computer and then send it out. So a lot of times you'll see a call pop up before it's actually dispatched out. There's just that, it's not much of a delay, but for something serious, it's enough of a delay that you're like, oh, I want to see what that is. So I was sitting at a red light, and I see a priority 1 shots call pop up at Come and Go, a gas station on just east of me on Chestnut Expressway, just west of Highway 65. And I'm like, oh, that's really close. So I click on it and I'm trying to read the comments. And as I'm doing that, they put out a tone. So whenever it's a priority call, they have a tone that they use that's kind of the get your attention tone. And they tone it out as a priority 1 shots call. Someone's been shot at this gas station. And in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm pretty much as far east. We don't really go. Once you get east of Glenstone, there's not a lot of businesses. It's more residential. So like, there's not a lot of officers that spend time east of just because of the way the dynamics of the city. Everything kind of happens in between Glenstone and Kansas Expressway, just the way the city's set up. So I knew there's probably not anyone going to be out there, just the way the city's set up. So I was sitting at the intersection. Another officer, Chris Walsh, was actually sitting at the same intersection. He was sitting in a lot where they were doing construction, typing a report or doing something with his computer. And so as soon as call pops up, I hit my lights and sirens, and he hit his lights and sirens, immediately whipped out behind me, and we kind of start jetting down the road. While we're on the way there, they knew the guy was driving a black Volkswagen Golf. So in my mind, they had said that vehicle had been seen over there and it was on 65, so it made sense. So in my mind, that I was going to pass this black Golf on the way to this call and maybe get in a chase or, stop him, whatever. And that was just what was going to happen. And I'm kind of looking for him the whole time as we're going. We know one person's at least been shot. We're kind of, as you're going, you kind of get in that like zone, like you're looking for the car, and I'm trying to read the call comments and stuff like that. But they were actually saying, like on the radio, like there's still shots being fired in the gas station. We can hear shots all over the 911 call. So we end up getting to the gas station. We pull right in, and we're just kind of sitting there. We all jump out. It was me and Chris were the first ones on scene. And I didn't actually hear, but another officer had actually found the car east of the gas station on the road, and him and a security guard had found it, and it was unoccupied. I don't know if it was wrecked or if he just parked it there, but the car was left there, so he wasn't in the car anymore. And I actually kind of missed that radio traffic. I didn't catch that part. So as we get there and approach the gas station, there's actually a guy standing out in front of it, and does the typical, like, waves his arms over his head, like, help, help. And so we kind of come up to him, and he's like, hey, this guy got shot. He needs help. We're like, where? And Come and Goes, they all have a big red pillar that comes out from the front of the store, like on one side or the other. And it kind of juts out, and the whole front of the store is glass, but they had like the frosting, like ads and stuff at the bottom half. So we can see into the store, but we can't see below the frosting. So like we can see there's no one in the store, which, in my mind, okay, if someone just came through and shot in the parking lot, everyone in the store is going to run. Like, they're not going to stay in the store. Maybe they went back to the manager's office or they're hiding.
Did you have any like exact or like updated information, like who the caller was, or because you said there were still gunshots going on in the background?
Mhm. No, we didn't have any of that stuff. There was a couple callers, but it ended up being from the time we got the call until the time we got to the come and go. Um, Once you get east and you're going east on Chestnut from Glenstone, there's not a lot of stoplights. I don't even know if there was any traffic. Like, so it was just a matter of minutes. Like, we got there super quick from this time this call was dispatched out to the time we got there. So, I think there was a couple callers, but like that information, like, didn't really come across, and like we can click and read it, but it was one of those things where you're running code as fast as you can. So I was like trying to read some of the comments that were coming in and trying to listen to the radio, but in my mind I'm also like, where's this car is going to pass me going west, like where is he going to be? And so
That's important that you were keyed up on that, especially as a new officer. What we try to train new officers, especially in FTO, is like you can't have the blinders on and just go, right?
Yeah.
You got to make observations as you're going to a scene.
Yeah, and that was kind of like my whole idea was like, all right, he's gonna pass me. Like, he's driven by and shot. Like, we're looking for this car. Like I said, just kind of like you said, a newer officer kind of did get caught up in the moment, so I didn't miss some of that stuff, like about the fact that someone else had found the car and they were out with the car that was empty and that kind of stuff. So
It's kind of not realistic, right? Like when you go to like the burglar alarms or a shooter or something like that, I mean, the chances of like the person still being on scene is,
Mhm.
you would think, to a degree rare. Like no
Yeah.
one's hanging out after they rob someplace or shoot or break a window or something.
Yeah,
Right?
and that's like, it wasn't abnormal to respond to a shooting, especially like, I'd done it countless times. But you get there, okay, someone's been shot. It's this person was shot. Where's the shooter? They left. They're
Yeah.
gone. So, or a drive by happened. Someone drove by and shot. Okay, where'd they go? They drove that way. Like, we don't know. So it was very like not abnormal for us to show up and have a shooting have happened. But like you said, no one was there. Like, the suspect was always gone. And that kind of complacency, I think, played a part in the whole situation. But as we go up, we talk to this guy, and he's like, "This guy's been shot." And there's actually, he worked for like a trash company, and he was a garbage man who was tucked up against the pillar on the outside of the doors, and he'd been shot. And so this guy kind of points him out to us, and then this guy bolts. I had no idea where he goes. I don't know who he is, like, but he takes off running, and so we're like, okay. And so we kind of start working on this guy who's been shot. He was shot in the stomach area, and we could see, like I said, we could kind of see in the store, but the way this guy was positioned, I actually end up kind of putting my shoulder against the window. So I'm not looking in the store. I'm looking down at this guy. It was early March, so it was chillier. It wasn't super cold, but it was cold enough. Like, I still remember, like, I had like my long johns on under my uniform. So this guy had on like a big Carhartt coverall suit. And Chris, who was with me, he was right beside me. He was in the army and had some experience, more medical training than I did. And so he was like, "Hey, we got to cut this guy's clothes off, like, to see if we can figure out what's going on." So, I reached for my knife because that's what, cops never carry shears or anything helpful. But I reached for my knife because I was like, "Well, I'll start cutting." And about that time, there was a gunshot. Um, so for me, I heard one gunshot, and then that was all I heard. And then time kind of stopped to the point that I can still see like glass flying from the window in front of my face, and I can count the little pieces of glass that are flying into my face, which is very, like, I tell people, I'm like, I don't believe it. Like, I can, like, it happens. So I heard one gunshot, and then I hit the ground, and in my mind, I thought like I was out, like I was unconscious. I'd been knocked out, like whatever happened. Come to find out, it was actually like a couple seconds before I started taking my next action. But because of that stress reaction, I had auditory exclusion. There were still more gunshots going off, and I didn't hear any of them. And then I didn't realize that like it was seconds, like time had slowed down. Like, I fully believed initially that like I was knocked unconscious and like I was on the ground for I don't know how long. Come to find out, a couple seconds had gone by, and I actually kind of like started to regain my composure. And like, when in my mind, like I say, like I woke up even though I wasn't asleep, but like my brain started working rationally again. And there was a lot of blood pouring down into my face, and I couldn't see. My left eye was very covered in blood, and so I couldn't see. And I was like, I just got shot in the head. And my initial reaction was, this is bad. Like, I just got shot in the head. Like, this is so bad. And so for whatever reason, I did like the thing that people do, and I like started wiggling my toes. And I was like, oh, hey, I can wiggle my toes. Well, that's a good sign. And then I started wiggling my hands, and my left hand didn't work super well. I didn't know at the time, but I'd been shot in the left shoulder, and the round had gone through my shoulder. So, but I could wiggle most of my fingers, and I could tell my fingers worked. And I was like, all right, that's good. And then I was like, wait a minute, your brain's working. Like, you're thinking, like, you're taking the time to think this through rationally. Like, you're still good. And so, like, I'd always, like, they train in the academy, like, just because you get shot, just because something happens, like, you're not out of the fight. Like, you can't just lay down and give up. Um, Still remember, like, one instructor, like, there was a active shooter scenario that we did in the academy. We used simunitions, and like, I got shot, and he's like, just because you got shot doesn't mean you're dead. Like, you keep going. And so, like, I still like remember that response. And so I literally like said to myself, I'm not dying here. And then rolled over, unholstered my gun, and they also teach you, get off the X, move out of this spot. So I knew, like, I'd been shot here, and I knew I had a pretty good idea that the shooting was coming from inside the store. So there was a garbage truck parked kind of perpendicular to the store. So it almost, like, with the store, it formed an L. And I was like, well, a garbage truck's good cover. Like, there's a lot of heavy machinery there that I don't think rounds can go through. So I stood up and ran back around the garbage truck, tried to take a minute. I keyed up on the radio and said, my radio number that night was 224. And I said, 224, I've been shot.
224, I've been shot. 224, I've been shot. Affirmative, was Galloway and what? Status. Clear shot fired at 224, 2885 East Hudson Expressway, coming down, one officer shot.
At the time, I wore, like, an earpiece because that was one of the things, like, I wanted to be able to hear. What I didn't realize is, like, when I was shot, the earpiece was severed. And so my radio still worked, but due to my earpiece not working and then my auditory exclusion, I was like, didn't hear anything. I didn't get a response. You can listen to the radio traffic, and they're like, 224 has been shot, 224. They tone me and warble me, and I never hear any of that part of it. And so I'm like, crap, I can't get onto my radio. So my best friend actually drives that beat where the shooting happened. We went through the academy together. Like, we worked the same squad. He is my best friend. I was like, well, crap, I know Compton is coming. And I was like, maybe I can try to call Compton and tell him, and he can get on the radio. So I actually tried to get my phone out. And in those high stress situations, I had no idea what my passcode to my phone was. Like, I could not unlock my phone. A mix of that and the blood and stuff like that. So, and I was like, well, that's not an option. So I put my phone back, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go in, and if this guy's going to come out shooting, we're going to finish this, and I'm going to do what I can do. So I came back and took a position kind of around the front of the garbage truck, and wasn't able to, like, really use my left arm. It was kind of numb, but my right arm, I'm right-handed, so I could get my gun out, had my gun, and I was just kind of watching and waiting for him because I fully expected him to be coming out shooting. And that never happened. So some time had gone by, and then I was like, all right, well, I know he's in there shooting, so maybe I should just start putting rounds in there and see what happens. But again, go back to my training. You've done that in your training, and you're like, hey, you're accountable for every round. You don't know. And thank goodness, obviously, I didn't make that decision because there was people in there that ended up surviving that were alive.
Couple questions, and not to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
And just as we go, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what you don't know. Policing looks so different across the country when it comes to, like, gear and body armor and all these things, right? There's law enforcement officers that go out there that aren't wearing vests,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe don't have patrol rifles. Like, what does that look like, for you guys?
Yeah. So we had, like, the standard, like, typical blue uniforms. We were, like, the level 3A armor, which is the pistol rated. Like, and at that time we didn't have, like, the external vest or everything. So they're under your uniform shirt, and then you have your duty belt with you have a pistol and all your other fun equipment, your tasers and stuff. And then you can go you get in a shotgun in the academy. So you have a shotgun we carry slugs in our shotgun, segmented slugs. And then after you're out of the academy, you can actually go back through and qualify with a rifle and get a rifle. To this point, I hadn't done that, but we also have a policy at our agency that your rifle and your shotgun have to be in your trunk. So even though like we knew, like we didn't think he was there, like, so I think Chris had a rifle. I had my shotgun, but the way we had parked our cars when we arrived, that getting back to get one of these long guns wasn't really an option, just because that would mean running back across in front of the store and trying to figure that out. So I had it, but it wasn't accessible, especially once you started taking fire, like trying to get back to the car. And like I've already talked about, kind of some of those things, like you think it'd be really easy to stick my key in the trunk and pop my trunk. But after experiencing that, like you're in that adrenaline, like I don't believe, like, I don't even know if I would have been able to get my keys off my duty belt and kind of go through that. So,
Right.
we
It's not even necessarily giving away like law enforcement tactics, right? It's just some agencies, for a reason, they don't roll out a patrol rifle, or, we have lots of shootings. Why would I take the rifle out, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
it's like, well, that might look too aggressive, or maybe I don't even need it, right? But I know
Yeah.
that's kind of changed over the country of like, you know what? There's a shooting call, this type of shooting, I'm just going to go ahead and have it with me, right?
Yeah.
Just in case.
Yeah,
And that
just-
might have been why, like, your partner maybe had his, right? Because, being in the military, it's like, why would I not have my rifle, right?
Yeah. And so that like experience, and like we have some cars that have like the like in car, like the cage lock, but like I think obviously I understand like why the policy is there, like because there's not a way to secure them other than the trunk. But it's also one of those things like where like if it is happening, like it's very difficult to like, okay, I'm at this shooting. Do I want to go get up there and run up and help this person who's been shot? Or do I want to run back, pop my trunk, get my shotgun out, chamber around, run up and see, then try to figure it out. So
I think there's a couple of important things there too, right? For new officers, and I talked to a lot of people about this, and it's like scene safety, right? Like, it's a goofy thing that we say, but we don't realize, is the scene safe, right?
yeah,
Can I actually help this person? But the drive and desire to go help people, like, shelves that, right?
100%.
Like, do you immediately run up and give aid, or do you kind of like slow roll in a little bit, like, all right, what's actually going on here, big picture? Do I try to break through some of those things that you talked about, right? That's like, we want to break tunnel vision, we want to break audio exclusion, right? And that's kind of like, let's look at and get the whole big picture, take a deep breath before we like jump, right?
Yeah. And
So
that's a big thing. Like, I mean, looking back on it, like I talked about, like it wasn't abnormal for me to respond to a shooting. Like, okay, I show up, this person's been shot. This is what I'm going to do. I mean, if I'm being honest, most of the time when I get there, I'm like, I really hope I don't have to ride in the ambulance, because every time I have to ride in the ambulance, I end up doing CPR the whole way to the hospital. And I'm like, it's just very taxing, like, so I was like, this person's been shot. It is. But going back through, that's another, like, when I talk to people, like, slow down, like, and remember, like, what your priorities are. So your priorities are make sure the scene is safe, because if the scene's not safe, you can't help them. Like, the person who we were trying to help, unfortunately, like, we didn't end up helping because we ended up getting shot ourselves. And the way it played out, like that, okay, this guy, who knows what would have played out. But if we know that the shooter's in there and we kind of make the scene safe first and address the threat before we do that, and that's kind of one of the big things that we teach. And we've going through, like, they've kind of changed like our active shooter policy. Like, if you go to an active shooter and you have that stimulus of shots being fired, like, yeah, you're going to have to walk around or over people who have been shot. But that's just because you can't help those people if there's still shooting going on.
And that's not like me beating you up or criticizing.
Oh, no.
Like, I've done that, way too many times too, right? Again, that's what people don't understand. Just because the uniform doesn't mean we don't think and act with emotion sometimes, right? Like, the same concept of, fear and anxiety and stress and just that drive to help people.
Yeah.
I think it's also important, like, to rehash what you talked about too. Like, people don't understand like stress and what stress does, like, to the mind. And like you already kind of mentioned, like, I can't even remember the passcode to my phone. Like,
Yeah.
this is a common thing.
Yeah. And it stayed that, and it lasts. Like, eventually I got to the hospital, and like when I was at the hospital, I couldn't remember the passcode to my phone. I couldn't get my phone unlocked. And I'm like, it's very simple. Like, I unlock my phone every day, multiple times. And all of a sudden, like, at that point, it had been half an hour later, and I can't unlock my phone, and I don't know why. Like, I'm like, I can't figure that out. And so I think that's one thing that, like, one of the things I tell people, like, prepare for is, like, these things are going to happen. Like, And the term I use is like, it's the simple things aren't going to be simple because you think like, oh, this is simple. I do this all the time. And then that your body's reaction to stress and how your brain works, like you lose those simple fine motor skills that you think, okay, I can do this. And then you lose your major motor skills. And now you're like, oh, I wasn't prepared for this at all. And you're like, yeah, you weren't. You got to prepare yourself physically and mentally that, okay, this is what I need to do. This, slow my breathing down, take that minute, step back, try to figure out what I need to do to get a grip on this situation.
It's important for like law enforcement officers, like stress inoculation training, right? Like, unfortunately, these crazy situations, like we just have to be used to them, right? Like,
Yeah.
it should be commonplace for us. And just, hey, business as usual. I'm gonna go in there and like do the job that needs to be done.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm very fortunate. Like Springfield does a good job. Like we like in the academy, like you get shot a lot with simunitions, which I'm a big fan of, like the simunitions force on force training, because it's as close as you can get to like that stress inoculation, like the real thing of like feeling pain and feeling something hit you. And so like I have that experience. And so some people like I've talked to since then that they're like, yeah, I just went through like the basic academy. Like I never did any of that stuff. Like, everything was, and I was like, how did you like function? Like I wasn't prepared. I'm like, cause I wasn't prepared and I went through this intense in-depth academy. And so like that being able to go the extra mile. And that's something that I think for law enforcement, we have to recognize that like, it's not really something that like the academy can prepare you for. They can give you the groundwork, but you have to really work on it like individually to try to figure it out going forward, and it's something that you have to stay on top of, because it's just like any other skill, shooting, your wrestling, jiu-jitsu, whatever, like all that stuff, you have to stay on top of it. And if you're not training for it and preparing yourself, then when it does happen, you're like, oh crap, I've lost. I don't remember what I'm supposed to do.
It's important to pump what you said too, like the will to win, desire to live, right? Again, so many times in training or in situations, it's like the officer just sits down. It's like, what are you doing, right? Again, we're training your brain, right? Because like you talked about already, you don't understand how the brain like computes time, distance, and space when like stress is happening. Like you have to get up. You don't stop.
Yeah.
We can never stop.
And you made that mental decision. You mentioned you're behind the garbage truck, and your left hand is kind of, but your right hand you have control of, and there's a shooter obviously, and this is your job. This is, you have to, you're there. It sounded like you made that mental connection.
Yeah. I mean, I made that pretty much. I was like, well, if I'm going to go out, like, I'm not going to go out like just laying here. Like, it's going to be a shootout, and whoever wins is going to win. And that was what was going to happen. And like, kind of waiting for that to happen was that acceptance of like, I've been shot, but now like I can take this, like I got shot and I can take this and I can like let it happen and run and hide. Or, in my mindset, the biggest thing was like, okay, if he shot me, and at this time I didn't know where Chris had gone to. I'd lost sight of Chris, but like he shot me. I don't know where Chris is, but I know there's a lot more police officers coming. And so like everyone that we work with, they're my friends, they're, your brothers and sisters in blue. Like, am I going to let him do the same thing to them? Or am I going to try to do whatever I need to do to make sure that they get here safe and able to do that? And that was that, like I said, going through that mindset and that behind taking that minute and be like, all right, yep, here we go. And fortunately it didn't happen that way. He didn't come out, but
is there a lot of interagency like work? Because like for us up north, and this was always the good feeling, is when something bad happened, it's like, hey, send everyone.
Oh,
we would have cops from like 10 different towns, counties over. It's like, I will be there.
Yeah, that was I didn't get to experience it, like I didn't realize it, but we had Springfield PD, Greene County was there, Highway Patrol was there, Republic, which is a small suburb, Willard, Fairgrove, like everyone was coming, to the point that like later on I found out there was some guys that were in the back, and they were actually with a private armed security company who just had heard it, and they showed up, and like the private armed security company was like, hey, we're here. Like, what do you guys need us to do? So yeah, everybody is an all hands on deck. Like everyone's coming, and they're going to do whatever we can do.
But in the moment, you mentioned your earpiece is damaged.
Yeah.
So you don't know. And that's why you went to go for your phone, so you can get your buddy there.
Yeah.
So you don't know. Eventually, I'm sure you're hearing sirens and things like that. But
yeah, it took, so what ends up happening is I'm behind the garbage truck, and eventually the guy who found the car, he was close. He's the first one to get there, and he was newer than me. So, I mean, we're talking like less than a year on the street. Wow. And he runs up to me, and he's screaming. Like I can see it in his face, but I have no idea what he's saying, because I can't hear. Like my auditory exclusion is still gone. So he's yelling, and I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. Like, sorry, man. I'm like, we got to go in the come and go. I'm like, we have to go in there. And he's like saying something, and he's trying to like look at me, and I'm like, we have to go in. And he's like, no. Like, eventually I found out he was trying to get me to go sit down because he just rounds the corner and sees me, and I'm pouring blood out of my head, and my arm's just kind of dangling, and which I can get like that, like, oh crap, like I never thought I would see this, but like now, like this is going on.
How many
He's
times?
probably like,
yeah.
oh my God. Like,
Yeah, he was like,
you're
oh,
badly injured. What are
yeah.
you doing?
So
How many times had? Obviously, you don't know at this point, but how many times had you been shot?
so I was shot 3 times. I took one in my vest, like right, like kind of in the area where my heart and lungs are.
So it just comes through the side of your vest here.
It was actually point blank. Like I think it was the first one.
Okay.
But my vest actually stopped it, which they don't know why. I'm a big point blank fan. We wore point blank vests, so I'm a big point blank supporter. But like talking to them, they're like, maybe it tumbled just right through the glass because he was shooting us with an SKS, so 7.62 rounds. That round went through and actually stopped my vest. I found it later in the hospital, like in my vest still. So when that round hit me, that caused me to turn, and that exposed my left shoulder, which I was shot the second time just under the left shoulder blade. And that round caught me flush and ended up going up through my shoulder, through my brachial plexus, and then wrapping around and stopping in my chest wall. My vest actually like kept that round from going through my entire, being a through and through. And then the last one was like I was shot in the head, basically like an execution style. Like they don't know if it was a ricochet or what, but there's still like I have the X-rays. Like there's a bullet in the side of my head, and so
I think for like new officers and even citizens who might see this don't understand the concept of a bulletproof vest versus bullet resistant versus maybe, yeah, the bullet didn't pierce my body, but the concept of the force that's coming with that round and the damage that just getting hit with an impact can happen.
Oh yeah. Eventually it was a combination of the one that stopped and then the one that went through me because they were both on my left side. But eventually, like the left side of my chest turned into a bruise, and then it eventually spread all the way down my arm. And I was like, why am I so bruised? And then I went to the doctor later on, and they were like, hey, like, yeah, you have no idea how much force is hitting you. Like, yeah, it's not penetrating you, but like that force is still going into your body, and like it doesn't just stop there. So that was why it ended up spreading all the way down like my left arm. And so a couple days after, like I had this gnarly bruise from my left chest that like ran down my arm, and it's like, yeah, it's from the force of that round hitting me, because you said even though it stops the actual bullet, the force still has to go somewhere. And like I said, we just wore the level 3A, the pistol rated plates. So like anything above a pistol, which this was a rifle round, like it's not supposed to stop it. So the fact that it did, that is a miracle, really.
Wow. So the next officer is on scene. You're behind the garbage truck. He's talking to you. You're not hearing him.
Yeah.
He's trying to move you.
Yeah. He was trying to get me to sit down on the curb, and I was trying to get him to go in the store. Eventually, like we discussed, like, I don't know how we came to the conclusion, but he was like, I'm going to go to the back. So we have containment. You're on the front. I'm going to go to the back. There's a bunch more people coming, which is done. Then officers start rolling in. And the first, officers start rolling in, and the first guy gets there, and I met him like once before. Like Springfield's a decent sized department, but he was actually stationed at Missouri State, the college. So he was a Springfield police officer, but he worked at the college. So I didn't really know him. And he starts doing the like battle check, like, okay, where are you hit? Let's figure out, do you need a tourniquet, that kind of stuff. Kind of trying to address those needs. And then my sergeant gets there, and she's wonderful. She's like my second mom, but she has her tourniquet. We'd actually just gone through tourniquet training. So like she has her tourniquet. She said it was the first time she'd ever carried one. And she has it out. And I'm like, it's not going to do any good. Like, I don't know where you want to put it, but I distinctly remember you don't put it around the neck. So we're not going to put it there. And my shoulder is a little too high up. So obviously that wasn't an option, but I found out later through some medical training, you can actually like reach into your clavicle here. And if you are shot like up there, you can pinch the nerves, and you can actually shut off blood flow the same way you would with like a tourniquet. But
are you guys required to wear tourniquets?
yeah, now we are.
Now
So
we are.
they were just implementing like that policy, like
Gotcha.
where we were going through like stop the bleed training and tourniquets and stuff. So now every officer has a tourniquet, but at that time, like we were just getting them. Like we hadn't really had that experience with them. So that was, like I said, she'd been a cop I think she retired 2 years ago. So like she'd been a cop for 20 plus years, and that was her first time she'd ever carried a tourniquet that shift, and it just worked out. And she's like, we didn't even have tourniquet holders, so she carried hers in her sock, like stuck in her boot, and that was where she like pulled it out of her sock. She's like, where do you need your tourniquet? And I'm like, great idea, but I don't think it's gonna work this time. So
That's why like training is so important, right? So absent training, you just show up and say, "Oh my God," right?
Yeah.
But now you have training. It's like, all right, now I at least have the tools. So that's why training needs to keep extending, right? Because like, yes, I showed up. Yes, I understand the stress. Yes, I have some tools, but maybe there's a better tool, right? Like you said, maybe just putting a finger in the wound, right, to stop the.
Yeah.
Maybe the tourniquet's not the right tool, but I like where you're going. Like your mind's right with giving the proper
yeah,
blade.
like learning and trying to expand that knowledge because okay, all right, now I know what to do if it's tourniquet, and even training, like you said, the reps. Like I'm a big thing on like reps. Like so, if you have your tourniquet, you know, a lot of people will carry them on their vest, or some people have like the holster mounted tourniquets. But like, okay, what are you gonna do if you get shot? Because like my left arm, if I need a tourniquet, was useless. Okay, my tourniquet's on my left side. Am I gonna be able to reach it with my right hand? Am I going to be able to get it out and open? Am I gonna be able to, like having that practice of doing that kind of stuff? And we do that in our training. And some people, you look at it, you're like, oh, this is monotonous, and it can be, but at the same time, speaking from experience, when that situation happens and all of a sudden you're like, crap, I've never put my tourniquet on one-handed with my opposite hand. Like I said, I was right-handed, my left hand was the one that was out, but if it was my right hand, okay, we've talked about like, would I be able to draw my gun? Like, how am I going to get my gun out of the holster if my right hand is the one that's injured? How am I going to be able to shoot? Can I shoot with my left hand? So that training, just keeping expanding on that knowledge that and trying to make yourself better. So if you ever do have something happen, like you're the best you can be.
What's the famous phrase? You never rise
to your level of expectations, you fall to your level of training. Yeah. I really like that one. So that's one of my favorite ones. I like, because everyone thinks, oh, something happens, I'm going to be John Wick and I'm going to go in there and save the day. Right. But we don't do that. Like
it's always that when it needs to happen, I'll be okay. I'll do it. It's
yeah.
Like, no. There's a reason why people have success in their careers, and especially the easy example is like the sports world. Why do you have success? Because of repetitions.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So, so they start doing that stuff. Like I said, once they get there, I'm like, all right, you're leaving. And I was like, I don't want to leave. I'm good. Like it's that mindset, right? Like we talked about like that. Like I'm still in the fight. Like I'm good. And like, no, you're leaving. Eventually they like run me back to a police car behind a bunker because everyone is piled in. So now there's just police cars everywhere, which is something that like I would hit on for law enforcement officers to keep in mind. Like if you do respond to this, like keep in mind like your entry and your exit, because if you have to get people out, like in this situation, like we had to go past 20 cars, but because of the way the entrance was so bottlenecked up, like we had to go to the back car. Like that was the only car that could get out. And same thing, I mean, if you're thinking like an ambulance, fire department, like you have to remember like, okay, if these guys have to get in, like don't bottleneck yourself up, like try to leave some room, because if you do need to get out quickly, like how are you going to get out? But we fall into that trap of it's the same thing. Like, okay, I'm here, just get as close as possible where I need to. Okay, everyone's parked here. I'm just going to pull behind this car. And now you're running past cars. So end up jumping in a police car. What I don't know has happened so when I was being shot, Chris had actually gone back to the other side towards the gas pumps. And when I got shot, Chris had turned and came back towards me. And the guy had stopped firing at me and he fired at Chris. And well, the guy was firing at Chris is when I actually stood up. And the guy's he shot Chris, and then he actually like slung the rifle back down, like to point at me, and I was gone. So Chris literally like saved my life, like coming back like to save me. So, he gave me that opportunity to stand up, and that was what allowed me to get away because the guy was going to shoot me again.
Not always necessarily typical of people that we deal with, right? A crime commits and they're trying to flee. This is an assassination.
Oh, he was actively like he had said like he was going to kill cops. Like he like knew what he was doing. It was an active attack. Like he, I found out later, like when we showed up, he was actually hiding in the beer cooler, which is why we didn't see him. And he had like a manifesto and stuff. I can't tell you anything about him because don't care. But he knew what it was an ambush. Like he was waiting for us, and that was his plan.
Did he have other weapons too?
Yeah. So actually what happens is after he shot Chris, when he went down to shoot me, he saw it was me, that I was gone, and he actually ends up dropping his rifle. I guess he was wearing I don't know if it had plates in it, but he was wearing like a tactical vest. and he had a pistol on his like holstered, and he actually ends up running into the back of the store and killing himself with the pistol. So I don't know if like I tell myself what happened is like he like looked down to shoot me and he realized I was gone and he realized, oh, okay, it's probably game over because if he's gone, like that means that he's somewhere and that was what he decided to do. But as far as like why and what his ideology or anything like, I couldn't even tell you his name.
It's not important. He's a coward, right?
Do we know that a crime happened and he thought, well, I'm in it now and I'm just going to kill cops? Or do we know if that intention was, I'm going to set up a situation so that cops come?
So I know that like he didn't have like any criminal record. Like he had like 2 speeding tickets. Like we had no history with him. But like as far as like him starting to shoot, like I think he just like started shooting. And like I said, he had a manifesto that like he was like reading to people and telling people about being disrespected. And so I think like it was just one of those things where his car became disabled at that gas station. And he's like, this is my last stand. So he ended up shooting 4 people inside the gas station. He killed 3 of them. 1 of them survived. And then there was another person who was able to survive without getting shot at all. But I think he kind of decided like, this is my last stand. And then he made the decision. He saw us show up and he's like, well, I'm going to go shoot some cops because I've shot everyone else. I guess I can't speak to like what his mindset was for why, but it just kind of worked out. He had people in the beer cooler with him. But I think like he had moved them in there. Like they were strategically placed. Like I think he knew what he was doing. So I think it was one of those things where he just made the decision like, I've come this far, like now we're just going to see what happens. And unfortunately, like I said, me and Chris just ended up in the wrong place and he had the advantage, like the ambush. I mean, even if we would have, looking back on it, like obviously I've replayed the scenario a lot, gone through and Monday morning quarterbacked myself. But I mean, even if we would have done things differently, I mean, it's still going to be a bad situation because we would have, if we walk through the front doors and he's in the beer cooler and we don't know he's there, we're still outgunned. He has the advantage. If you go to like the OODA loop and stuff, I mean, he's coming out with the rifle, and rifles versus pistols, usually the rifle is going to win. So that kind of thing. So that kind of just how it played out was the way it did, but it unfortunately was just that scenario. But I can't speak to like why he decided to kill himself or what his mindset was. Fortunately for me, it made my stuff a lot easier because then I didn't have to go to court and I didn't have to walk through and go up and testify and relive it all because that we can get into the trauma and stuff after the shooting. But once I was gone, like I said, I didn't know anything about Chris. We actually we drove past like where the ambulances and fire department was staged at, and we had like that conversation of like, should we stop and let you out in the ambulance? And I was like, nah, just drive me to the hospital. Like, let's just get there. So
it's what I always told my people. I was like, if something bad happens and I'm not at the scene, I will personally be either somewhere here or at the hospital, but look for the most direct route, right?
Yeah.
Time is important.
Yeah.
Surgery, especially in these instances, surgery is what you need.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I don't think we actually had it out loud. I found out later, like we both like thought it, like as we like drove by, like we like both looked at these ambulances because they're all stacked up. And I was like, no, just go. And he was like, I think I can get you there quicker. And like, they're going to take time. So we ended up getting to the hospital and we actually ended up, they were waiting for us in the ambulance bay, but we didn't think to go in through the ambulance bay. We just walked in through the ER door. So I just walked in to the hospital, like to the ER, like where you check in. Naturally, I said what was on my mind, which was, hey, I'm a police officer. I got shot. I need help. But there's also other people who got shot who might need help more than me. So whatever you want to do. And they were like, well, okay. So
you've been shot in the vest, shot in the shoulder, shot in the head, and you walk under your own power into the ER to check it.
Yeah, 100%. Like walked like right in, like
I'll take a number.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, got there, and I was like, hey, I'm good. Like, and then
something else to think about on the hospitals for people listening, trauma centers, right? I mean, you know, hospitals are different.
Oh yeah,
right. And Springfield is thankful to it be large enough where we have the trauma centers that can handle these types of gunshots. But there are some jurisdictions, some cities that don't. So you have to think about, you know, you have a person, a police officer shot. Where do you take him or her? You know.
Yeah, in Springfield we have 2, and then we have the third hospital, which Cox North. But like they're not a trauma center, but like in my experience, like if someone gets shot and they throw, you know, your buddy in your car, they take him to Cox North because it's always the closest, and then Cox
Yeah.
North. And so they have it down to a science to where like they know how to get them to the trauma center quickly, but like still like having that mindset like, okay, this is the closest trauma center. This is where we need to go. And so then, they, like I said, they weren't expecting knowing the ambulance bay thing, like, hey, take him to the ambulance bay, because that's where they actually had my bed and stuff all there, like, so they could wheel me in. And I didn't go there. So they have to wait to wheel the bed up to the front. And they're like trying to decide if they want to put me in a wheelchair. And I'm like, just let me walk. Like I've walked this far, I promise. And then,
Do you remember this part?
oh yeah, this part, like
Okay, so
this is like kind of slowed down. Like I have my hearing back and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
like this is like very vivid. Like there's a lot of stuff that like happens in a short period of time that like, I don't know, just in my mind, like they wheel me back and they're like, all right, take your clothes off, or we're going to cut your uniform off. And I'm like, this is a brand new uniform. I just bought it. And I'm like, you're not cutting it off. They're like, okay, we'll take it off. Well, naturally, I take my shirt off, take my vest off, but we go to this hospital all the time for work. Like I go in here and work calls with people, bring people here. And I'm not taking my pants off. And so eventually they're like, hey, you got to take your pants off. And I'm like, do I really? Like, yeah. And I was like, oh, this is unfortunate.
Do you still have your weapon with you?
Yeah, so like I still have my weapon and everything. They just kind of pile it on the floor, but they come up and they actually they're like, hey, you have to take your pants off. We know you don't want to cut off, but like we're gonna help you untie your boots and stuff. And so he's like, I don't know if he's a nurse or nurse's aide or whatever he was, but he's kind of, then he's like, let me untie your boots. I'm like, wait, I'm like, I have a gun on my ankle, like just so you know. And so he's like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, just it's a holster, like you just unclip it and then and so he does, and like I still remember like he unclips it and then he like holds it like it's like something stinky, and he's like he like turns around and hands it to the other officer. He's like, I don't know what to do with this. And he's like, cool. So they do all that stuff, and then they kind of start doing their like treatments, and they're like, all right, we're gonna take you for CTs, and they do their tests. And that was the only time I like freaked out, was when I was in CT. Was so they do the first CT and you're sitting in a tube alone, and it's terrifying. And that was when I like started praying and asking, God, like, give me strength, help me through this. And then the poor lady comes in and they want to inject me with dye so they can get a better picture. And I started asking her, hey, am I going to be okay? And she's like, don't worry, the doctor will come tell you. She keeps repeating it, doctor will come tell you. And finally I sit up in the CT machine and I call her some not nice names and tell her that she needs to listen, that if I'm going to die, she has to tell me. And she's very, very kind. And she says, listen, you're probably not going to die. You're conscious and talking. Like, that's a very good place to be. And I'm like, yeah, but I've seen people die that were conscious and talking before. And she's like, no, she's like, I think you're going to be okay. I was like, all right, cool. So I had that conversation, and then, they wheel me back, and then people start showing up, and the chief shows up and they have to stitch my face. And I was like trying to get him to leave the room, and he won't leave because I'm terrified of needles. And he actually like holds my feet and like rubs my shins while they're like stitching my face shut, and have that experience. And then, the investigators show in and they start taking pictures and start doing all that fun stuff. And
I think it says a lot about your organization. I keep interrupting you. I think it says a lot about your organization, what time of day it is it?
Oh, yeah.
And like your chief's there.
Yeah. I mean, it's midnight. I don't know what time he showed up. It was fairly quickly. And I mean, there was a lot of cops, like not just like cops like that were working, but like there was people like off duty working. There was people that were off duty that recognized, like, so when this all happened, like we talked about earlier with the agency thing, we just had 2 officers shot. Greene County was really cool. And they were like, hey, we're taking all your calls. Like if there's a call in Springfield, send it to Greene County. Like we're going to mutual aid. We're going to work your calls. People that weren't at work started showing up, in uniform, being like, hey, what do we need? Do you need help here? Do we need to just go take calls? Because I don't know if people like really think about this, but like just because this happened, like this is like a big oh crap moment. Like this is, it ended up being earth shattering for our department, but like people are still calling 911.
Yeah.
There's still other emergencies rolling in. It doesn't stop. And so kind of trying to like think about that like big picture, like you can't just be like, oh, like we just had 2 officers shot. I found out later on that Chris was killed. So we had 2 officers shot, 1 was killed, but like you still have to come to work like the next day, especially. And I tell everyone that, like the people that came to work that night, the people that came to work like the next day, like that still put on that uniform and like went into work knowing what just happened, like those are the people that are heroes. Like, because I can't imagine what that was like to show up to work and like be like, hey, this just happened last night 8 hours ago, but now I'm here and now I have to go work, act like it's normal. And like you can't, in policing, you can't show up to a call and someone calls and says, "Hey, I need help," and you can't show up and be like, "Do you understand what just happened? Like, do you understand?" Like, I don't like, you can't have that bad attitude, right? You still have to be helpful, positive, and so being able to like work through that, like I think, like you said, speaks a lot to the department and the people that we have, the character of the people that work here, because I don't know like how they did it. Like I don't know how you're able to work through that and process that and kind of go through that experience.
It goes to the expectation of society and other people too, of that like police officers are something different, right?
Yeah,
And that's when we talk about wellness, and you don't understand like what's happening in the mind, right? Because when you see a tragedy happen in a business, what happens?
no,
The
it closes
the
down.
business closes for a
Yeah.
little bit, right? And everyone gets a reprieve, and everyone goes home. Everyone tries to process what just happened.
Yeah.
Guess what? There's still calls holding. People still need help. We still have to go do this.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean that experience, I don't think like people think about that. And like that was something like I like really thought about, because like people would come see me and be like, "Hey, what's up?" And they'd be like, "Oh, I'm working." Like, "You're working?" Like yeah, I just worked a crazy like domestic. Like, you just worked a crazy domestic. Now you came to see me in the hospital, and then you're gonna leave the hospital and you're gonna go back and you're gonna work who knows what else. And I was, so that kind of really like like you said, it's not really thought of because everyone's like, "Oh, they're police officers." Like there's something different than everyone else, but in reality, we're all just humans, like the same as every week. Once we take the uniform off, you go home and you're just a normal person. So that part of it was really like stood out to me, especially, for my agency, for my department, to be able to look back and be like, you know what? Like they kept going, like they kept pressing forward. People kept showing up. They kept working. So that having that experience was cool.
So you're in the hospital,
Mhm.
and so maybe we'll talk more about like your treatment, and what happened, and when you found out maybe the status of the other officer. And again, like for anyone who's never been like an MRI or a CT machine, holy cow, that is
Mhm.
unnerving, because if you're claustrophobic and it's dark, you're in there alone, and the sounds that those machines make,
Yeah.
unsettling.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Adding to the stress that you just got shot
Yeah.
in a critical incident. And
I always say, thankfully, they didn't put me in the MRI machine, because at the time I still had like the bullet in my head. I still had a bullet in my chest. I had a bunch of metal and stuff spread out throughout my body. And I'm like, thank goodness they didn't put me in the MRI machine, because it would have been like a second trauma. I don't know. But yeah, so, going through the ER, like you're in the ER and like they start doing all their tests, and then eventually it kind of dies down. And then you have to start figuring out, okay, I have to notify my family and like have that conversation. They all lived in Illinois. So, trying to get a hold of them and have that was one of those things where like you don't want to call them on the phone and make this call, but I also don't want to like send a police officer to their house and be like, "Hey, is your son Josiah?" So trying to figure out like what we were going to do for that. So
Do you have a protocol for that? Because it's something we talked about too, is like, listen, there's certain people I don't want to go tell my family.
Yeah.
I don't want them to, because they're not good about delivering information. Like,
Exactly,
here's
yeah.
the person I want to go represent if something happens.
And we'd experienced something with that similar in a different scenario. And so like my best friend who I talked about, who I was trying to call, like we made a deal like, hey, if something ever happens to me, you go tell my family and I'll go tell your family, because we know each other's families. We have that relationship. Like it's not a stranger showing up being like, knock, knock. Hey, your son, your husband, whatever got shot. We're going to drive you to the hospital. And I was some weird person you've never met. And you don't know what to tell them. Like, and it's awkward for the officer too, right? Like, especially if it's, how am I going to have this conversation? Like, I've never met this person in my life. And so
That's something you don't want to practice either. But even like for yourself, right? You got to remember that when you call your family, you can't be like, I've been shot. You have to be like, hey,
Yeah.
how's it going? Just so you know, we had a little incident. I'm fine. You
Yeah.
got to get that information out quick to your
Yeah.
family, right? Because they're like, why is he calling me? It's like, hey, just so you know, I'm good.
yeah.
But
And that was something I really tried. Like, I called like my mom and I told her, I was like, hey, first of all, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm going to be okay. And then told her, and then, like they were like trying to figure out, like, it's like a 6-hour drive. So they're like, we're going to come down there right now. This is like 1 a.m. And I was like, no, like not needed. And they're like, well, like whatever. Like at first they wanted to send a picture. They're like, send us a picture. And I was covering. I was like, don't send them a picture. I was like, let me talk to them on the phone. I'm like, that'll do it. And then eventually I did send them the picture, which is like, I have a picture where I'm like smiling, giving the thumbs up, because like, this is the picture that was sent to my parents. Like, so I'm like, if I'm going to send a picture, like I have to like look as good as possible. Like,
is this the one that you showed me where your
Yeah.
face is covered in blood?
Yeah. So that was the one that like we sent to my parents, like, because like I was like trying to like tell them like, hey, I promise I'm okay.
I want to reiterate what Aaron was saying as well. You had a system set up in place ahead of time where
Mhm.
you and a buddy agreed this is how
Yeah.
we'd make these notifications. And my agency, that was an optional form, and I could never grasp why people would say, I choose not to do this.
Yeah.
Like think about how important that is. Like you said, do you want a stranger knocking on your door or calling your mom, or do you want your buddy who can work that through? Yeah, so hopefully your agency has if you're listening, has a policy in place, or best practice in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. At least some kind of like protocol. And I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, like in this situation, it wasn't possible because of the way the scenario played out. Like that everyone, like my buddy was on the scene. Like, he didn't make
Yeah.
it to the hospital for a couple hours later. So, um, it wasn't possible, but like just having that idea of like, okay, like this is who we're gonna send. You don't want to send like the chaplains, like you don't want to have a chaplain knock on someone's
Right.
door and be like, oh hey, it's the chaplain and a police officer. Like this is bad,
Right.
right? You're like, so kind of trying to work through that, and then like just being prepared, like for the officer, like okay, what are you gonna do? Okay, they have family that's this far away. Like, how are we gonna notify their family? Like, who are we gonna send? And I think for Chris's family, like that was something that like they sent like, well, his supervisor I think went, and then one of his like best friends who was like close, like he wasn't even, I don't think he was even at work, but like he came, they got a hold of him first and were like, hey, this is what happened, like we need to go tell Chris's wife, like what is our plan? And he's like, I'll do it. Like that's, but that way at least that wasn't that stranger, it wasn't that someone who was like showing up and like, because they have questions and you don't know what you can tell them, and you're just, it's a not an enjoyable position to be in for any reason, but like it's that added stress on the officer who's doing it. So in having that like protocol of, okay, if this happens, this is what you can tell them, this is what you can't tell them, because one thing that they told everyone, like they told like the other officers, they told my family, like they're like, hey, he got shot in the head. And so like if you hear the words you got shot in the head, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Like that's bad. Like he's gonna die. He's gonna have a TBI. He's gonna be, like it's the worst case scenario. And so, I think having that like policy in place and be like, I don't know, like what his medical condition is, whatever it may be, like maybe it is like he got shot. I'm not telling them specifically where, because just because so obviously for me they told me you got shot in the head, but I'm fine. But you could be like, oh hey, he got shot in the leg, and everyone's like, oh, he got shot in the leg, he'll be fine. But you hit a femoral artery and things are not fine. So
Much different, right?
yeah. So I think kind of having that plan in place and that policy for how you're
Yeah.
going to proceed forward is really important.
So did your mom make the trip down immediately?
Yeah.
Of course.
So I convinced them. I was like, don't come down here.
Yeah.
My brother at the time was going to school in Indianapolis. So they ended up driving. My brother drove back to Illinois, and then they drove down the next morning, which this is March 15th, 2020. If you have followed current events,
COVID.
March 16th, 2020 is when COVID happened. Like they shut down the world. So like, my family gets there, and it's a humorous story I tell, but like my mom gets there and they were like, you can have 2 visitors. That's how many you can have. Like they wouldn't let anybody else up there. And like they were like tried to be strict, and they'd say like, oh, there's a police officer in there. Cause they all one thing my agency did, which was really cool, was like they stationed like the whole time I was in the hospital, there was an officer outside my door in my room, which was like super nice, like just that reassurance, because they take all your guns and everything away, and you're just in the hospital. So but they would be like, oh, there's there's 2 police officers in there, you can't go up. And eventually my mom got there and she's like, I'm his mother, I'm going up there. Pulled out the mama bear claws, and then my dad had parked the car and was shortly behind her, and he did the same thing, like, oh, blah blah. I'm like, who are you? And he said, I'm the father. I'm like, oh, bless you, father, you can go up there. And I thought my dad was like a priest, and so that was how he got up there. And I was like, whatever, that works. So yeah, that was. But the wild thing is because of COVID, I was only in the hospital for 3 days. Like they're like, hey, we cannot have you in the hospital, you got to go. So they'd stitched up my face, and then my biggest wound was where my back was. I had a pretty sizable hole, and then it actually, like, you could see where it'd gone through. So they had to like pack my wounds. So they're like, we're going to teach you to pack your wounds yourself, and as soon as we're confident that you can do it, like, you're out. And
You got to pack your own wound on your shoulder.
yeah, so like my mom and then like me, like they like trained everybody how to do it. But like normally they would just be like, hey, you go into the doctor's office twice a day and they pack your wound. Like, but it's COVID. You can't do that. So
so you have a hole through your shoulder.
Yeah.
Did it hit any bones or anything else?
No, the only thing it went through is so it started, I know there's the video. So it started right here, And then it went up and around. It went through my brachial plexus, which is like your nerves and your arteries that control your left arm. So it caused some nerve damage, but like it didn't hit any bones. It didn't hit any of the arteries. Like nothing like super crazy was like there. I was very like, the biggest thing they were worried about was the hole, like just how it closes up. And if you've ever experienced that, like sometimes they can close up like the surface first and then it'll still be hollow and then you can like re-poke through it. And it's which was my biggest fear because they're like telling me all about this. And I'm like, oh no. So like for the longest time, like people would be like, hey, can I see your scar? And I'd show them like, but you can't touch it. Like, you're not allowed to touch it. Like I was worried someone's going to poke through it. But
And then what about the round in your head?
that one, they were like, it didn't penetrate my skull. So the way it hit back here and then it just rolled along my skull. So right there. And they're like, you're good. Like, it's fine. And so that one, and then like the round in my chest stopped like right in here. And then the jacket came off and stopped over here. And you could actually feel them. Like you could pick them up through the skin and twist them and pinch them. And they were like, I was like, you're going to take these out, right? And they're like, no. And I was like, why not? And they're like, we're not putting any more holes in you right now. I was like, oh. Okay,
So do you still have metal in you?
Those ones they eventually took out. When I went back to work, my vest rubbed them really bad, and like I couldn't hold a gun on that side, like a long gun. So like I eventually went and I was like, hey, I want these gone. So they took those two out, and I have them at home in a jar. But that was one thing when I had surgery. I was like, hey, before you, like they're like putting me out. I'm like, hey, make sure you put those in my hand when you get them out. And the doctor's like, we'll see. And I was like, make sure you put them in my hand.
Yeah.
And then
I need souvenirs.
Yeah, I woke up and I was like, hey, where's my bullets? They're right here. I told the chief the same thing, like in the hospital. I was like, hey, can I have my vest? He's like, what? I'm like, I want my vest and I want the bullet that's in my vest. Like when this is all done, like I want that. He's like, of course you can have it. And I was like, okay. Now we're 5 years later and I'm still waiting to get my vest. So, but they have to hold it for whatever and all that stuff. So, but
that's something maybe people wouldn't understand about like that warrior mindset, right? Like, yeah, I want that.
Yeah, I'm like, I want that stuff back. I told it was cold. So I had on like my nice Under Armour, like long johns. I haven't got those, but those are like what I really want back because I'm like, those are expensive. Like those are perfect, but they're like, yeah, you'll get it all back at some point. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, so the round that's still in my head's in my head. And then there's a bunch of pieces of glass and metal in my hands and arms. There's actually some in my eye from the glass metal that flew, like the metal binding on the windows, like that stuff ricocheted and went into my face. So
are you still picking those pieces out?
Occasionally they'll come out. I still set off metal detectors. Like if I have to go through a metal detector, I'm gonna set it off. Like we just worked the fair recently and they have like the handheld ones, and I was like, hey, you know, see something cool, like to the little security guy. I'm like, just buzz it over my head. And he does. And he's like, what's that? And I'm like, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Like it's one of those stories. So yeah, there for a while they came out like it just looks like a pimple, except when you squeezed it, it'd be a piece of metal. And at first, like I started collecting them, and then it got to be too many, and I was like, all right, just get out. I don't even care. But so yeah, I only spent 3 days in the hospital. Did the whole like recovery thing. Eventually the wound closed up really good. Had some nerve damage in my hand, but like nothing crazy. And basically just like I would either get like a shooting sensation down it or it would just fall asleep. And that still happens sometimes. But they did like physical therapy to try to rebuild that stuff. And then, like I said, I started getting ready to go back to work. I was really big into like physical fitness. Like I like to work out and run. So one thing that I wanted to do was like see like how this was going to affect my vest. So I'd put my bulletproof vest on and the new one, I got a new one, and I would go run and it would just rub. And like, it was just a weird, like, just like, it would like rub the skin raw. And I was like, hey, I want these gone. And they're like, are you sure you want to do that? And I was like, yep, cut them out.
What time period was that?
So this is July of 2020. So
May, June, 3 months.
3 months. Yeah.
And you're ready to go back to work.
Yeah. I mean, I was like fully like ready to go back. Cause I was like what I wanted. Like, I love, like, I always tell people like before I got shot, I would have done police work for free. If they came to me and said, hey, you have to work for free, I would have done it for free. I enjoyed it so much. And so that was kind of my mindset, was like, I wanted to go back. I wanted to get back as soon as possible. You know, one, you lose like your camaraderie, like all your friends, like all my friends are cops, and like they would come by on breaks. I lived on the north end, so like they would come take their break at my house and like we'd hang out still. But like, you know, you're still in the group text, like, bro, we just got in the craziest foot pursuit. And I'm like, cool, I just played my 37th game of Call of Duty and I'm so bored. Like, you know, you can only sit on the couch and do that stuff for so long. And it was during COVID, so you can't go do anything. So So like I was like pushing, like I like pushed it like as hard as I could, like went and saw like the psychologist and did that part of it. And like, you know, those questions, if you know what you're doing, you go in there and you know how to answer the questions. And they're like, wow, you're in really good like mental health. And I was like, yeah, sure. We'll say that.
Before the mental, but let's go back to the physical. You're physically fit. You're someone who believes in, you know, active training, things
Yeah.
like that. Were you ever told, let's say from medical staff, a doctor or something, that helped you, you know, maybe recover faster or
Some of them definitely said like it like had an effect like on just like my how I was able to get through it, like the
Yeah.
way like it affected my body was like they were like just because of your physical fitness, like, you know, and you know, there at the time I was 25, so like you're young, like you're in good
Yeah.
shape, like that's gonna help you, like not just that night, but like you said, like also the recovery, like your body is gonna bounce back. They're like you're gonna have some things like arthritis, like I've had arthritis in my left shoulder now, and they're like that's gonna happen, but like it's not gonna affect you as much as like maybe if you were someone who was out of shape or older.
yeah.
So they definitely said that played a big part in it. And then like I said, I was just pushing. Like every time I'd go see the doctor, I'd be like, you think I'm good to come back? In the hospital, I told him, give me 2 weeks. Like I told the chief of police that I was like, I need 2 weeks off and I'll be back to work. And like I couldn't see the injuries to my back or anything. Everyone else could. And they're like, we'll see. And I'm like, give me 2 weeks. I'm like, I think I can need 2 weeks and then I'll come back. So like that was my whole goal, is to get back to work as fast as possible. And like I said, once they took these out, like I had to wait for these stitches to close up and everything. But like once they were done, they were like, hey, so what are you feeling? Like, you ready to come back? And I was like, yeah, how about this week? And they were like, well, what about next week? And I was like, what about this week? Like, this is good. And they're like, well, next week. And so they like picked their day, and that was the day I came back to work. And
Physically, you're like, you're good, right?
Yeah.
You're feeling good. So I want to talk about the mental aspect and like your mental health and like maybe even, you know, further down what you're doing now. But I also, we talked about, but I want to recognize it further that, you know, a police officer was murdered and assassinated when
Yeah.
you know, at the gas station.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about that, maybe like when you found out, or, you know, what all happened to him, because, you know, he stopped initially to help somebody else and save somebody else's life.
Yeah. Yeah. So they wouldn't tell me. Like that was like one of the two things like I asked in the hospital. How's Chris, and who killed the guy, or did we kill the guy?
Yeah.
And they were like, we'll tell you later. They're like, we can't, we'll tell you later. And they just all brush around it. Eventually, after a couple hours later, it got to the point they're like, hey, we're moving you out of the ER. We're taking you up to a floor room. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, like, can I go see Chris? And they were like, no. They were like, and that was when they like sat down and told me like Chris was killed. The shooter killed himself. And like that was like really tough. Like that was one of those moments that like it all felt real, because like I didn't understand it. And I mean I really struggled with like this guy who like he was when I first got shot, he was crouched down we were literally shoulder to shoulder. And I was like, no, I was like, I'm here, like he's got to be fine, like there's no way, it doesn't make sense. And they're like, no, he was killed. And I was like, how? Like they explained, like, and I like tried to make them like tell me how. Of course no one like knew what had actually happened. They hadn't got, but like I was like, explain to me, like it doesn't make sense. So that part was like extremely, extremely rough. I mean, just going through that. And some other stuff happened after that. Like when like we left my room, they wheeled me past Chris's room, which is like when I like saw him, and I don't think they did it on purpose, but like that was something that like getting into the mental health stuff, like I didn't realize like how big of an effect like all of this stuff takes a toll on you. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, Chris literally like he turned around and came back to me, literally like gave up his life so that I could have my life, and I'm eternally grateful to him for that. And it was something that like I was really like a struggle to try to come to grips with. Like I'd gotten out of the hospital, and his funeral was like the next week, and they were like, hey, are you gonna go to the funeral? And I was like, yeah. And then because of COVID happened, they were like, oh, well, we have to shrink down the size of the funeral. And eventually like someone actually like called in and said like they were going to come to the funeral and like infect police officers and people with COVID, because it was like right about this time, you know, there's all the BLM stuff is starting up again, and they're anti-police. And I was like, man, this is just insane. So,
You gotta say that again. So at the funeral, somebody's
Mhm.
gonna come and essentially attack the funeral now.
basically, yeah, like they like said like, hey, we're gonna come to the funeral and like we're battling COVID restrictions, and so like I think originally like they planned like they were just gonna do the funeral like private, like invite only, basically, because you can only have so many people, and then they were the graveside service was gonna be open to the public because um Springfield is very pro police. We have like the majority of the community here supports us, and so like they were planning for that, and then eventually like someone like made an anonymous tip that like they had COVID, and they were going to come to the funeral and they were going to start infecting people, and so that like really like so that changed it. So the funeral and like the graveside service were only open to law enforcement. Like whenever we had the procession, like when I tell you Springfield's pro law enforcement, like they lined the streets of Springfield like miles with people out there like paying their respects to Chris, and that was super cool to see. But then at the same time, I'm like, this really like it didn't help that like mental health side of it, because then I just got more pissed off because like someone was like you understand, like this person like Chris, he literally was just doing his job. Like he was trying to save someone's life. He was trying to save my life. He was trying to save the other people's life. Like none of us signed up to be like, hey, we want to go get shot. We want to go experience this. And so that really like played like a negative spiral on like how I looked at like the outside the world because of that. And it was really tough because like I'm like, none of you understand. I'm like, you don't really get what I've been through. Like, and even other cops, it got to that point where I reached that, and I was like, no one understands what it's like to like basically at the time, the word like I like carried it like guilt. Like I felt guilty for survivor's guilt for surviving. Chris was married, Chris had kids, like I didn't have that. So I was like, man, like why was it him and not me? Like and reaching that point of where it felt like it should have been me. And then dealing with all this outside stuff from the world, that's this negative view of police and this negative interaction because, as while I was off, that's when George Floyd happens, and then we had some other events happen here in Springfield, like attacks on police officers, and that was just a terrible, terrible time and dealing with that part of it.
What something we didn't even address either was, at one point the shooter was hiding in the beer cooler. What was the range of when, or do you know how far away when he was initially shooting?
So I'm not for sure on like what the range is. I know that he like came out and like he eventually like gets to the window, like to the like glass. Like he works his way to where like he's like standing over the top of me, like point blank, just on the other side of the glass.
He sees you and Chris and rendering aid to.
Yeah, and that's when he starts. He closes the distance, and he, I mean, just starts shooting.
When you think about like any average gas station, probably not more than 20 feet away from the first shots, right?
Yeah,
Before he walks up point blank.
Yeah, at most 20 feet. I mean, and Alex said he had a tack vest and like holsters and mags. Like, yeah, this wasn't something like I think he was like experienced. Like, it wasn't just someone who like went to Walmart and bought a rifle and was angry and decided to go use it. Like, I think he had experience shooting and had been through that part of it.
And to be clear, he shoots you, Chris, and then 2 civilians or 3 civilians?
So before we got there, he'd shot 3 civilians.
Okay.
Well, he shot 4 civilians. And then he ends up, when he shoots me and Chris, the guy who we were helping, he ends up shooting in the head after he shoots me and Chris. He ends up executing that guy. And then the other 2 who were in the store who passed away, they were deceased by the time the other officers got in there. And then there was another, he was actually a come and go worker, like a clerk, and he was shot in the stomach, and he actually ends up surviving. Crazy story. He actually like went back to work at that same come and go, like overnight shift. Like, so I don't know how frequently he works there, but like I know like one of the officers that was there that night came and talked to me. He's like, that guy was there, right? Like he's working right now. And I was like, what do you mean he's working right now? He's like, yeah, he went back to the come and go. He works at the same come and go. And I was like, that is wild to me because at that point I hadn't even gone back to the come and go. I was like, I don't even want to drive east of Glenstone. Like, but yeah, so
tell us a little bit more about Chris. You mentioned he's married, but was he on your shift? Did you work with him? Like,
yeah, so Chris worked the 3rd shift and I worked the 2nd shift. He had his wife's name was Sherry and his daughter's name was Morgan. And like I didn't work with him I wasn't super close. He actually he'd got moved that year he had did the south side, but because of department needs, they moved him to the north side. So, but he was one of those guys, like, I mean, I was still new. Like, everyone on my squad was still new. Like, I mean, we're talking under 2 years experience. Everyone on his squad was under 2 years experience. So, like, he was like one of those people who, like, I tell this story like that he was like the guy like you went to. Like, I found out later on what it was like to be that, but like that experienced officer who like knew what he was doing. Like when we got sent this call, like I like looked to see who was coming with me, and it was Chris, and I was like, oh, thank goodness it's Chris, because he'll know what to do.
Squared
Because
away.
sometimes like, you know, I don't know what to do, but
How many years had he had on?
I want to say like he had a few more, maybe like 4 or 5.
Okay.
Like he had been on, I think 2 years more than me, so somewhere
Yeah.
around there. But yeah, he did that. He was, like I said, in the military, so he served in the Army and the National Guard and did that whole thing. But he was the squared away. Like, and when our shifts were working, the second shift and the third shift, he was the squared away guy. Like, he is the one who like showed up. Actually, right before all this had happened, I'd gotten dispatched to an accident at the IHOP, and we don't work private property accidents, but the issue was some of the people who were involved in the accident were tourists. They were from, I don't even, Germany or something, Europe. They're European, and they didn't speak English.
Yeah.
And they had T-boned like this kid. He's like just gotten his license, like just turned 16, and he wasn't from Springfield, and they weren't from Springfield. And this kid's got his mom on the phone, and the tourists, like, they don't understand what's going on. And like I'm trying to like navigate this, and like it was one of those things where like it was just a cluster of a call. And because the mom's on the phone, she's screaming like, I'm on my way to Springfield, I'll be there in an hour, I'm gonna handle this. And like, it's not that big a deal, like, you know, everything's good. But and so trying to like work through it, and then, you know, it's just me at this point. Like, they hadn't sent another officer because it's not a big deal. And then like Chris shows up, and like he's like, hey, he's like, I'll talk to the mom and you talk to them and get their info, their rental car. And I was like, cool. And like by the time we get done, I was like the mom's like, thank you so much for taking care of my son. Like, and I was like, what just happened? And he's like,
he worked his
nothing.
magic.
Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you just got to talk to him. He's like, she's upset. He's like, think about it. He's like, how would you feel if like your kid was like an hour away, just got their license, and gets in a wreck? And your kid calls you and goes, Mom, I just got in a wreck. He's like, she's going to be ill. And I'm like, okay, cool. So like, he just had that ability. Like he was naturally like really good at policing. He was really good at talking to people and making those things happen. So, and like that, like calm in the midst of chaos, like I said, like that, when I like looked at the screen and I was like, okay, Chris is the one coming. I was like, thank God, because like, it's no offense to anyone else on the squad. Like, they're all great officers now. I like work with some of them still, but like, there's I'm new and I don't know what I'm doing, and you're newer than me, and it's the two of us. I'm like, I don't like.
There's almost a calming effect when you have a squared away officer like that.
Yeah, and you have that like, he's just that example of that, you know, solid officer who like he was going to come in and he was going to get his job done, and he was going to do it the right way, and that was going to be the way it was done. Do you have that, like you said, have that effect like of like, okay, he's here, he knows what he's doing, like he's going to work through this. So yeah, he was a really good dude, really amazing person.
The department requires you to go to talk to somebody.
Yeah, you know, you go see the psychologist and like do the testing, and you know, and those questions, if you know what you've taken them before, you go in there and you do them and you get out. And for me, my biggest thing was like everything mental was like, I'm good. Like, kind of just shove it in the box, because I was concentrated so much on my physical and get back to work. Coming back, I've since found out that like basically like what I did was like your brain has to heal the same way your body does. And if you don't heal your brain, like it's going to come back. But I focused so much on my body and the traumatic injuries that my body had that I like shut my brain off. I was like, I'm good. Like, and I struggled with like, I had nightmares at first and, you know, the typical stuff, but like, I would just put it away. I'd be like, you know what, this is what it is. It's happened to this point, and, you know, I've got to get through it. So kind of fought back through that, and then went through like I said, all the BLM stuff. We had some other stuff happen here in Springfield, like attacks against police officers, and like I just didn't realize it. Like, I just eventually I became like very angry and very jaded, and I'd go to work and like I would be angry, and I didn't realize I was dealing with all this, you know, issues that had came up, you know, the survivor's guilt, post-traumatic stress disorder, all that stuff. Like, I didn't realize I wasn't adjusting that. One of the first weeks I was back, there was a shooting call, and we were the only ones available. This is like the first Friday I'm back to work, and I'm riding with a buddy. The department had a really good policy. I rode with someone else, And like we're driving, it's like 1 a.m. and we're running lights and sirens. And the guy I'm with's like, "What are you doing, man?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're driving slower right now than you've driven all night. You're running lights and sirens at 1 a.m. with no traffic." And I'm like, "Huh, that was weird." But like, just, didn't recognize it, didn't want to address it. Um, and it got to the point where like that was, I just couldn't handle it. And so, I did what every cop probably starts doing. I started drinking really heavily, was very jaded, very angry. I wasn't a good cop. Like I would go to calls and I talked about, you deal with these people on the street that we deal with all the time. I'm like, "You're stupid. Like, why did you call 911? You're wasting my time. You're wasting your time." Um, and I didn't really figure out like what was going on. Like, and it got to the point like where not only was I just so angry with the world, but I became so angry with myself. Like I really hated myself. Um, I really hated the person I was. I really hated that like I would go to work, I would come home, I'd get drunk and play video games. Like that was like kind of what I did. And it was getting to the point where like I was decided I was gonna commit self-harm acts and, reach that point. And it was a very like the lowest low I've ever been, and I didn't know what to do to get out of it because I started going to psychologists and counselors, started seeing these people. I think I saw 6 of them, but like I struggle very much with like I can go talk to you and you can tell me, yeah, this is normal, it's okay, blah blah blah. Everyone uses the word new normal. Hate that word, but they'd be like, yeah, it's okay. This is your new normal. I'm like, you don't understand. Like, do you understand how miserable I am in my life right now? Like, and I also struggle with like, you haven't experienced this, you've read about it in a book, but like when you get up, you go home and you live your good life. You shut that book and you don't have to think about it again. When I get up and leave your office, like this is me. Like I'm experiencing the same thing. So really, really struggled really hard with the mental health stuff and it took a while for me to get help. Until November, I listened to another podcast and they had a guy by the name of Jesse Hartnett on the podcast. And Jesse was a cop in Philadelphia. He was driving down the road and a dude just steps off the curb and starts shooting him and shoots him multiple times. And he's listening to this podcast and this guy, he's talking about, anger and the rage and all these things he's feeling. And I'm like, hey, this guy gets it. And so I reached out to the host of the podcast and he reached out to Jesse. And next thing, Jesse calls me. I mean, we talked on the phone for hours and he's telling me things. And he's like, I have another buddy, a guy by the name of Kyle Pitts, who is a Marshall TFO up in the Northeast, I think Pennsylvania as well. But he went through a shooting where he was shot and his partner on his unit was killed. And he's like, talk to this guy. He gets in. So like those two guys kind of became like my sounding board. Like something would happen at work and I'd call one of them like, hey man, can you talk? They were always there. They'd be like, yeah, let's talk through this. And there was some stuff I'd be like, hey, this happened. I don't know how it made me feel. And they'd talk me through it. And they really like started me going back up. And that kind of, I recognize this like void of Springfield, like hadn't had a lot of officers shot in the line of duty. And like, I like started trying to connect with other people I knew. And like, there wasn't this network. And so that was kind of, we started basically reached out through a police training company and started we call it the Survivors Club, but it was for police officers who'd been seriously injured in the line of duty. And it doesn't just mean shot, stabbed, ran over. One guy had been thrown, he was a New York City cop and he got thrown down a flight of stairs, like from a high rise. But like we started, having connecting and like you would connect and we would have meetings where we'd get on and talk. And, maybe somebody just makes a post, like we have like a group chat, and maybe someone makes a post and like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Anyone have this? And next thing you know, there's 8 other people and they're like, hey, I went through the same thing. This is what I did. I went through the same thing. And it really like opened my eyes as far as like being able to see like, okay, one, like I'm not alone in this because it's very isolating when you feel that way. And 2, like you reach that point and you're like, okay, what can I do to help? Because this helped this guy. So kind of trying to find that. And it really allowed me to find another purpose too. Obviously like what I went through, like was the worst of the worst. Like it was a nightmare. And now I can reach out and be like, okay, if I can help one other person who's gone through the same thing and help get them out of that struggle and get them out of that dark place, that was really like, okay, it was all worth it, right? Because now I'm helping others. And the same thing with the draining side of it goes, trying to like use my experiences to help others so that, if someone down the road responds to the same call, they don't make the same mistakes that we make. They don't become complacent. And if they do go through something similar, I can be like, hey, all right, man, let's talk. Like what's going on? How do you feel? And kind of use it for that. So that was really positive for the mental health side of things. And then if we want to get into what kind of I'm doing right now with it, there's a company. It's called Struggle Well. It's through the Boulder Crest Foundation.
Struggle well.
Yep, Struggle Well.
Okay.
So it started through Boulder Crest as it was called Warrior Path, which was for like veterans coming back. And basically the whole premise is that there's post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what everyone knows. And if you go to the doctor, it's what you have. They're going to tell you have. And then there's what this program is basically post-traumatic growth. So instead of, hey, you've been through post-traumatic struggle, you can either take it and make this your new normal, or you can go through and you can make yourself better than what you were before, right? Like we've been through this process, and like it's a whole class. It's a 2-day class. Like I said, if anyone is first responder, law enforcement, I highly recommend them to take it.
I usually do it here at MOCIC.
Yeah, we do them here at MOCIC. It's a nationwide program, so Springfield's big in it. Miami, Arizona, they do them all the way up the East Coast. Like it's a really cool experience to go through, and it completely changes your outlook on a lot of things. So being able to go in there and you learn not just learn about like what you've gone through and how to address it, but you also learn, okay, how do I deal with these issues? What are some tactics and tips that I can use that, okay, I can get through this and kind of move forward. So being able to do that, like I said, use my experience for the good has really been something really cool.
Wow. But the power of that, the community, right, of folks who experience similar incidents, you really talked to how that really kind of took you out of that dark place and made you.
I mean, that connection with those other people who'd been through something similar. I mean, fortunately, following my incident in Springfield, we had a string of big incidents of things happen, and all of a sudden now there's a group of us and we can be like, hey, you doing all right today? Just wanted to check in. So I'm kind of being able to have that ability and really build that connection. We call it the Survivors Club because it's a weird club that no one wants to be a part of. And if you're not in the club, it's very hard for you to understand like what it's like. But for those of us that are in the club, like we know, like you get it. And it builds that like brotherhood and that sisterhood, that friendship and those relationships. So it really helped me out a lot. Hopefully it's helped other people out a lot. I made some connections like with people that like I never thought like I went through a critical incident. And one of the first people I called after that, after I came back to work, was he's in the Survivors Club, but he's a cop in Wisconsin. And I just know him through that. I met him a couple times, but we've really hit it off. And I went through a critical incident. He was the first person I called. I was like, hey, man, you got some time to talk? And he's like, yeah, what's up, bro? So being able to have those relationships is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's incredible. And I think I can speak for Aaron. We're honored that you're sharing this because I guarantee you someone's watching this thinking, wow, I can connect, with an incident that maybe they went through. And
I hope so.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. Hopefully, anyone has any questions about Struggle Well or anything I've talked about, they can reach out to you guys. You guys can put them in contact.
Is there a website or anything we can direct them to?
So if they go to like the Boulder Crest Foundation, like that's where they have like the Struggle Well stuff. Or if they go to there's a Struggle Well website.
Boulder Crest Foundation.
Yeah, that'll bring you into the Struggle Well stuff as well. So they have a bunch of different. They have the 2-day class, a 5-day class, and then they have like they call it the Struggle Well experience, which is like an immersive, like you go for a week and you travel there and go through that. So there's a lot of different options out there, but any questions about it, they don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll do whatever I can.
So Struggle Well, just, making yourself available, just, being vulnerable, putting yourself out there and helping people. Those are the types of things to help not only yourself, but other officers, other first responders.
That's the goal. So
yeah,
hopefully, like I said, I mean, I've talked about like one thing everyone, as police officers, we fix everyone else's problems. And so a lot of times we ignore our own. So being able to like give back to our community and turn this around and have this experience and be like, hey, let me help you guys help. Because basically there's one thing in Struggle they talk about like hurt people and helping people help people. So healthy people help people. So if we are healthy as a community, as police officers, it makes it a lot easier to go out and help others as well.
Anything else you want to?
I don't think so.
Talk about it?
It's a lot.
Okay, yeah, it's a lot, and we
it's a heavy episode. So
yeah, we really truly appreciate you and your warrior mindset, and like I said, I know it's an honor to have you here and talk about that. So
I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate you guys, everything you guys do. So I use you guys a lot for different stuff. So I appreciate it. Just thank you guys for having me. And hopefully somebody takes something useful out of this.